This conference will now be recorded.
We have over half of us on this call. Chantal and Kelly, oh, Catherine's on now too. Good. And so I guess we're ready to go. And but we'll just finish describing our team. We have 6 of us in total. We have a code base that we have on the Redmine side. We have a repository for that. And then we have sub repositories, one for our documentation, which is in a LaTeX format, one for our graphical interface, which is another associated C++ program. And then let's see, what else do we have? We also have started up another sub-repository that we could use for maintaining examples to run through this. And so, we have, again, a relatively small team. Tends to be, one person managing the graphical interface, another person managing the manual. Myself, I do most of the coding on the main program that we have here with contributions from some of the others. I'll probably miss some aspects of that out, but that's a brief thumbnail of how our project is organized. And so we're trying to understand, how with the review aspects of Gerrit, how we might best use Gerrit with our small team.
Okay, great. So the things that I'll take you through today are kind of a basic workflow that we use in our group, and we kind of so the basic thing. I mean, you guys are already using Redmine, so you're probably like creating issues and assigning them to people. People are doing work, they're updating those issues, and right now you're probably committing your code back to the Git repo. The only thing that isn't happening, my understanding is that you're not using Gerrit at this point, and so that means that your code is not going through code review necessarily before it gets merged into the branch.
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay. So basically, the place that Gerrit plays a role in all of this is when you submit your code right now. So let's say you make a change on Git. On your local system, you put it in staging, then you commit it to your local repo, and then you push that commit to the repo up on VLab. The only difference that you'll be making is that you'll be pushing that commit to Gerrit, and then you'll be assigning people to review it. Those people can be kind of a central person. It can be anyone else. Some groups use different mechanisms by which they allow things to pass that gate. Sometimes, so Gerrit has like a rating system where you say, yeah, I give this a +1 or I give this a -1. And if 2 people, sometimes people have like a rule where they say if 2 people give it a +1, then we'll move it on. Our group in particular, we kind of have one person who actually checks out the code, tests it, and verifies that it does what the ticket says. And then once they're happy with it, then they would give it a +2. And then they may ask other people to review it too. And if they give it a -1, then they may, kick it back to the reviewer or the person who wrote it. So the thing that we're going to be going through is basically the steps in that process. So I'm going to show you kind of like what I would do as a typical developer. So we're going to be using a test repo, and I'm imagining you can see my screen.
Got it.
Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do here is we're going to create a new issue. So you guys have already done this before, so we'll just make it real kind of quick and easy here. So the subject, we'll just say demo, and I need you to fix this, and then all the status, and then you can assign it to whoever, give it a category and whatnot. This one apparently needs an impact. So then we create that. And so we have an issue number here is 67767. So let me just write that down so that I remember it. 67767. Okay. So what I do is, so at this point I need to clone the repo. So I'm gonna act like I'm two people. So I'm gonna go into worker one. That's gonna be the person who's gonna be assigned this task. So the worker one is going to, if they don't already have the repo clone, they're gonna clone the repo. If they already do have the repo clone, then they just need to do the steps that I'll do after the clone. So I'm going to clone the repo. So this clone syntax is a little bit different. And after you set up Gerrit, the alias, then you can just use Gerrit rather than the actual long HTTPS or SSH kind of stuff. And in particular, we added a new feature to our service that if you're in here and you go to the repository view, if you want to clone this, you can open this little section right here and it'll give you the clone command.
Yeah, that's convenient. I remember seeing that.
Yeah, and so you can get the clone command with the Gerrit or without using Gerrit or without the alias, or if you have to use HTTPS. It also has a clone with the commit message hook. So this clones the repo here and then copies the commit message hook into the repo. So the first time that you clone the repo, you want to put this commit message hook into your Gerrit hooks, or I mean your Git hooks locally. You only have to do that once. We'll just clone it and then I'll do that by hand. So let's just do it with the alias here so you can cut it. And then I can come over here and just paste it. And it says no project found. I think this one is actually called test. I don't know why that is like that. So it clones that repo. Okay, and then so if we look in here, we have a test directory, which is our repo. And if we go into it, we have two files in it. One is a PNG and one's a test.txt file. But there's also a .git file, a Git directory, and that .git directory has configuration associated with Git. So you only have to do this once whenever you clone the repo, but I'm going to copy STP from Gerrit, which is, I have this Gerrit alias set up. It's going to download the hooks commit message and put it into .git hooks. And I'll tell you what that does in just a second. So when we actually do our commit locally, it's going to put a change ID into the commit message, and that change ID, when we submit our commit to Gerrit, it'll actually have that change ID in there, and Gerrit will see that change ID. And then when you do any sort of amendments to that commit, like let's say I commit my code, and then the reviewer says, oh, this isn't right, you need to fix this. They'll kick it back to me, and say, you need to fix your code. And they may highlight different areas where it needs to be fixed. And then I need to get that code back on my system, make the fix, do an amended commit, and push it back up. And that change ID allows Gerrit to know that those are the same for the same commit. So this commit, if you forget to put this commit message hook in, the behavior you'll see is that you push a commit for a review, and then if you try to push it again, like let's say you do an amended commit and you try and push it again, and you try, it won't relate it. It'll create two separate Gerrit reviews. And so if you think you should have one Gerrit review and you have two, then after pushing your code up twice, then you need to have that commit message hook put in place. And I'll show you the thing that you'll see in the commit message that will tell you that that thing is there. Okay, so what I would do typically in this case is I'm getting ready to do the work, so I would create a local branch. So I do a git checkout, and then I give it a -b, and I give it the branch name. And what I do is I name my branches the same as a ticket number. And if I'm working on like let's say they've kicked back for review, during the review, they kicked it back and said, you need to fix this, then I would make my next attempt _2. And if it was a third attempt, _3. And I always create a new feature branch to do my work. So anyways, I create a local branch. And then, so I've created that. So now let's vi test.text. And we can come in here and we can add some stuff. Add some stuff at the end, add some stuff in the middle. Okay, and then we can save that file. Okay, and obviously you can edit with whatever you use to edit the file. Git doesn't care, it just cares that there's been changes. So now I need to add, and this is no different than what you have been doing. So I need to add that to the staging environment in Git. Okay, and you can always do a git status, and git status will tell you what is in the staged environment. And it's always good, I always do this beforehand, is to check what's in the staged environment before I go ahead and do my commit. And so now I would commit that. So I do a git commit, and you need to put at the top blab issue and then number and then 67767 and then some information. I fixed the problem. Maybe, whatever it is that relates it back to, what you actually fixed. So, and then you do a write quit. Okay, so our commit is ready to go. So you could do a git status here. And you can see there's nothing to commit because we committed it to our local branch. Now we need to push that to Gerrit. And this is where it's a little bit different than what you have been doing. So you have probably been doing git push and then origin master like that. So this is where you're pushing it to. So you're pushing it from your local machine to the origin, which is where you cloned it from. And then this is the branch you're pushing it to on the repo. So it's a little bit different. So you do a git push origin, that's still the same. But then you're gonna say head : refs for master. So this part is going to be the same every time. And then this is the branch you want to push it to up on the server. Okay. So you just have to remember this piece. And if you don't want to remember this, well, actually this piece right here, you can actually put that into a configuration file so that you don't have to remember it every time. I just type it every time because it, I don't know, further solidifies it in my mind. But if you were going to push it to a different branch, then you would indicate that here. So we do that. Okay. And so now, at this point, I've pushed my code for review. So now, if your Gerrit repo is connected to Jenkins, Jenkins will kick off and validate that there is an issue number associated with your project that is, in this case, 67767. And some groups have validation that validates that the, that particular thing is in, accepted for work or is in progress before, so some groups have different levels of whether validation as to whether or not, some people validate that the person who's assigned to the ticket and the status on the ticket is a certain thing. But in our particular case, Gerrit doesn't care. It just is going to validate that the issue number is set. And then we have this VLAB issue number 67767. So it just validate that there's actually an issue with that number. So now we can go to Gerrit. So let's go to Gerrit here, and let's just go to open. And you can see that my, so to get to Gerrit, you just go to vlab.nsub.noaa.gov/code review. You log in with your normal credentials that you would on anywhere else on VLab, and it'll show you all of the issues that have been pushed recently. And so just a little bit about this. So right here, it tells you the subject, it tells you the owner, what project it was, what branch, when it was updated, the size. So however long this bar is how big this changes. So you can see that this one that's right below mine is a pretty big change. So there's probably a lot of files, a lot of code was pushed. So they added 797 lines and took away 781. Mine's pretty small. I added 2 things and took away 0 things. So, so you can get an idea of how big your changes or how big other people's changes are. So up here, you can see there's a status open. You can use the search bar to search for you know, things that changes you've made before. Like if you want to search for, since we put the issue number in the commit message, you can search for your commit messages. So like I do this all the time where if I know there was a commit a long time ago and I want to see, I know the issue number, I can go into this merge right here and I can say message : and then I can put the number of the message in here. Let me see if I have, so I have one here that I looked at before. So it's 4452222. So you can do that. And so this is a quick way to find the code changes that you made for a particular issue. And so you can see here, we can click on it. We can go through and see all the files that were changed. And then you can inspect what was actually changed in each of these files. And I'll show you a little bit more about that in a second. But I wanted to show you this search capability up here. It just is really powerful. And that's one of the great things about Gerrit. Gerrit is not only just a code review, but it's a documentation of what was changed for a particular issue. So this has really great ways to look through the code and find things that were changed and compare them with what was there before. And it's just it's a great service. You can actually do searches for files. So if you want to find any change that involved a file name, you can do that too through the search bar. Okay, so let's go back to our open ticket. And so here is our Gerrit review. So you can come in here and you can see that Jenkins failed it. So Jenkins verified or went through and said it failed. And you can look down here and see why it failed. So you can go in and actually go to the Jenkins job and then find out why it failed. It does, Jenkins in this case just does a simple validation of, you know, what happened, you know, like, do you have VLab issue number up here and this, and I may have messed up something with that, but so here's that change ID that I was talking about. So if you, this is your commit message right here. Okay, and if you don't see that change ID in there, then that means you don't have the commit hook in place. And you can get that change ID from here. And if you forgot to put your commit hook in place and you want to, on the next push, associate this with this review, then you can cut and paste this change ID and paste it into your next commit message just like this. And you can get that change ID right here. So, okay, so anything, anyways, about this. So once I've submitted my review or my code for review, I typically come in here and there's a little button right here that shows a little person, and you can click on it and add a reviewer. So you can add, I can add John Chattel, and I can click add, and now he just got an email that said that I asked him to review this code. So now he could go in and he could actually check out this code, he could verify it, or he could just look at it in this interface. Sometimes if it's a small change, people won't actually check out the code, they'll just look at it. If it is a big change, then they may actually download the code and run a test on it, run tests and really exercise the code to verify that it works. There is a way when you push the code to review that you can specify reviewers at that point. That's kind of a nice thing to do if you always have the same reviewers and you don't want to have to come into this interface and designate people as a reviewer each time. And if you're interested in that, I can show you how to do that. So now at this point, John would come in here and he would look through the code. So you can look through the code, you can look at the commit message. Okay, here's my commit message. You can click back up. You can go look at the change. So here it says I had 2 changes in this test.txt file. And you can see that it tells you that there were 0 deletions and 2 additions. So if you click on this, it shows you a side-by-side comparison. This is the before, oops. This is the before, and this is the after. And the things that were added are in green, and things that are red would be the things that were deleted. So as a reviewer, John might come in here and he might say, he might highlight this and say, what were you thinking? Or he might be a little bit kinder and say, hey, you forgot to take out your print statements or something like that. I mean, that's very common. Like you submit code and you forgot to take out the little print statements that you put in there to test and verify that something was working. Or in Java, you can put try catch clauses around things to catch exceptions, and you catch an exception, but you don't do anything with it. You just leave it blank. And sometimes that's intended, and sometimes it's not. And so the reviewer may say, did you mean to do nothing in this case? And then you could respond back, yeah, I just want to catch the exception. I don't really care to deal with it. So sometimes there's like a back and forth with the review, like not everything the reviewer says you have to take into consideration and make a change, but sometimes you do make a change. Okay, so he would say, what were you thinking, and click save. And then you can see this says that it's in draft. That means that I haven't actually sent it. So you could go in here and make different changes or different suggestions. Okay, so now that I've made changes, and you would go through and look at each file. We only have one file that we've changed, so you can see that I have 2 drafts that are essentially comments that I put in here. And and it looks like while we were working, John went in and did a code review +1. Looks good. So the place that he did that was in this reply section. So in a reply section, you can write a general note like fix the issues I show in comments or something like that. And then I might give it a -1. And you can see my edits that I suggested are indicated right here. And so when John came in and did the review, he gave it a +1. And I'm going to give it my own code. I'm very critical of myself. I gave myself a -1. Okay, so a -1 typically is interpreted as you just need to fix it. It's not a big deal. If you give somebody a -2, it means there's kind of serious problems and maybe a bigger thing that you have to deal with. Okay, so you can see down here it's documenting everything that we're doing. So you can see that I originally uploaded patch set 1, Jenkins went and verified it and it failed. right here, build failed. Hopefully most of the time it would say build succeeded. Then John gave it a +1, and then I gave it a -1, and then I gave it these 2 comments, and you can click on these links to go to those comments. And so now what we're gonna do is I'm gonna go back, and let's say, so once I've submitted my code for review, I can move on and do other things. So once I've submitted my code for review, I'm sort of detached from it, right? Like I could go off and work on a different issue. But let's say somebody has done a review of my code, and I need to switch back to what I need to do work on that. Okay, so what I would do is I would come back to my this web interface, and you go to this download section, and what you do is see the section right here that says checkout. There's a syntax right here, a command that you can run that says git fetch, and it has a whole bunch of stuff on here, and it's actually referencing the particular change and patch set that I'm currently looking at. So you can see the patch set is selected here. We only have one patch set. So we can say, copy that to clipboard. I go back over to my repo, and I just paste that in and hit enter. It's going to basically go get that code from the repo, and it's going to get that particular patch set. And so now what I would do is I would do a git checkout and then branch, and then I would do, for me, what I typically do is I use the ticket ID, and then I would say this is number 2, patch set 2. Okay, so now I'm on a local branch, and I need to address those issues. So I would probably bring up, what I do is I bring up side by side here, and I would say, okay, this person said that I need to fix this, and I say, okay, well, I'm gonna go do that. Okay, so vi test.text, and I'm gonna come up here and say, okay, he or she really said that I need to fix that, and I need to put in a number 2 or so, I don't know, something goofy like that. So I could save that, and then I could come back to this and say, okay, I fix that. You could fix it in line here, or you could just come in and say, whoops, let me close that. So you can actually fix it in line, or you can come into the code, delete edit. That's if you want to edit it in line. Like you don't actually want to check out the code, you just want to edit it in the web interface. But I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say, it's done. I fixed it. Okay, and then I would move on to my second one. Okay, this is crazy stuff at the end. Okay, so I need to, I'll make it like that. Okay, so and then I might go back into my review, and I might just say I'm done with that too. Okay, and then what I would do is I would go back up and I would click reply. I would just, and you can write a comment in there, but you can see that it says I put 2 comments in, but now I have this change down here in my local repo that I need to basically push back up for review. So what I would do is I would do a git add test.text, okay, because I made a change to that file. And then the next thing that I need to do is I need to do a git commit, because I need to commit that change to my local repo, but I don't want to create a new commit because I'm already in the commit that I originally pushed up to the server, and I want to put it in the same commit. So you would do a commit amend. So you do a git commit -- amend. Okay. And you can notice that it comes up with your old commit message that you originally put in there. And then you can say, I fixed the problem. You could change your commit message to really fixed it. And you notice that this change ID is in here. And this change ID is what Gerrit is going to get when we push this back up. And it's going to use that to relate it to the original thing that I pushed up for review. So I'm going to quit that. Okay. And then I'm going to do that push again. So same push. So I can just use the up arrow to get the get push origin and then heads refs for master. And I can push that. Okay. So now I push that change back up for review again. So if we come back up to here and we refresh our page, you can notice that it says there's 2 patch sets. So, and I'm viewing patch set 1 because that's what I was originally looking at. That's what this number 1 is right here. But it's orange because it's telling you that you're not looking at the most recent patch set. You can see down here in the the Jenkins has already started a build on patch set 2. And you can see that I uploaded patch set 2. So if you want to switch to patch set 2, you can just click on patch set 2 here. And now I have patch set 2 up and at the server. So now the people who were original reviewers on this, they would get another email message saying, hey, you know, Jason posted another patch set for this issue. You need to go review it again. So they'll come in here and they'll do the review again. They can click on the files and go through them. So this is the difference between base, which was what it was before we made the change, and this is what it is at patch set 2. If you want to see what the difference between patch set 1 and patch set 2 is, you can click patch set 1 here, and you can see the suggestions, and then you can see what was changed. I added the number 2 here. I added this real end part, or the real part. So it allows you to really quickly see what the suggestion was and then what the fix was. And you can drill down, like sometimes I've had, I don't know if I want to admit this, but I've had code that's gone through 16 patch sets before. And so I can go back after the fact and I can look at what all the changes were in each patch set, even like 3 months from now. And if I want to see what the change was, so let's say you have 16 patch sets and you want to see what the difference between the original situation and patch set 16, then you set this one to base and then this one to patch set whatever 16, and then it will show you all the differences summed up. And so you can use this arrow over here to go through the different changes. So if you had multiple files, you could use that to go through all the files. We only have a commit message and a test file. So so maybe as a reviewer, maybe I say maybe I want to say, you know, need to add another file, and I'm going to give it a -1. Maybe this person really didn't pay attention to the fact that there needed to be another file. So I need to check out this. Now my code is still on that same patch set. So I mean, I could really just make the edit here, do a commit, amend, and a push. But let's, just for sake of looking at it, we'll make sure that we check it out again. So we go up to download, we copy that, paste it down here, check out, fetch that particular change. You can see the change here. This is the change here. This is actual review, and then this is the patch set. Okay, so now I would do a get checkout branch, and this is ID 67767. This is patch set 3. Then I would say touch temp.dat, and let's vi temp.dat and say, let me just paste some actual code in here. I'll paste some Java code. Okay, then I would do a get add temp.dat. Okay, and then I would do a get commit amend, because it's the same. I'm working on the same patch set, or on a new patch set, and it's got to go on the same commit message. And then I would say something like added new file. And you can see down here, it says that now my commit message says, if we were to do a get status, it would say that there was a new file and a modified file. I can write that commit message, and now I need to push this again for review. So now if we go back to the review again, and we refresh this page, now there's going to be a patch set 3. Now I can go to patch set 3, and you can see now there's there's 2 files, temp.dat and test.dat, and you can see this A right here. That means that it was added. If it's an A, it's added. If it's a D, it's deleted. So if I go and look, if I use these arrows, I can scroll through all the files that, and I could come in here and make a comment. You can also make a comment in general on the file by clicking on this link up here. And that's a comment just on general on the file versus a comment that's on a specific, a specific line in the file. And you can see I can go through all the patch sets. So I can say, if I want to see what the difference between patch set 2 is, and right here, right now we're on patch set 3, and the difference between patch set 2 and patch set 3 is this one file was added. If we want to show the difference between base, you can see there were 4 changes. There were small changes to test.text. So 3 inserts and 1 deletes, and you can see in this particular file temp.dat, it was a new file, and there were 37 inserts. So you can see the history is getting longer and longer down here, but it's keeping track of everything that's going on. Like, did Jenkins verify it? Did Ken review it? Did John review it? Did I, respond to the reviews? All that sort of stuff. So that, so now for this, if I was the person who was using this system, I could, let's say I'm the reviewer, I could give it a +2 and say it looks good to me and this is approved. I could post that, and then at that point, then there would be a merge. If I was the person who could do this, there would be a merge button. And then I could click that merge button, and it would merge the code into the baseline. So at that point, so up until this point, it's never showed up in the Git repo. So anybody who clones the repo would not get this change until it's merged back into the baseline. So it looks like there's an update down here from John. So it looks like, let me see what John did. So John gave it a +2 also. So he would see, I believe, if you have the right role, then you would see a merge button right here. And that merge button would allow you to click that. If you click that merge button, then, and only certain people in Gerrit have that role. It's an integrator's role. And they would merge the code back into the Git repo. And at that point, it would show up in Redmine, and everybody who clones a repo would get it. If it's not merged, the only way to get this piece of code is to use this right here. Use this, clone the repo, and then use this get fetch. Okay, so now let's say this has been merged back into the baseline. So I haven't done that yet, but because I don't have that button. But if I was to merge the code back into the baseline, then what I would do is I would do a get. So I would do down here, I would do a get checkout master. Okay, and then I would do a get pull. And then that would pull down my change. And then I would, at that point, if I wanted to create a new thing that built upon that change, then I could build it now. So now I could do it like if I had issue number 67768, I could do a get checkout, and then branch, and then 67768. And then I would do that work. I would follow the same process. I would commit it for review using the get push origin head refs for master, and then that would get reviewed, and then it would go through the same process. So that's basically the Gerrit code review process in a nutshell. I will say that once your change is committed and finished, once it's merged, you'll see these changes will show up. You can go and look at them in merged. And so your change will show up here. And if you only want to see the ones that are assigned to you, you can say owner and then self and then search. And then it would show you all of your changes that have been merged. So you can see all my changes here. And obviously you can there's a button for pagination, but you can see the relative sizes of your changes, what branch, what project they were on. If you want to see, so sometimes you commit something and then you say, that was a bad idea. I need to abandon it. So in your fix, so once it's merged, it won't show up in this open list. It'll show up in the merged part. But basically, sometimes you commit code and you say, that was a bad idea. I don't want to actually do that, and you want to abandon it. You can click this abandon button. That doesn't get rid of it out of Gerrit. It just marks it as abandoned. So it won't show up in the open, and it can't be, I don't believe it can be merged at that point. Once it's abandoned, so here are all the abandoned items. It'll show up in this abandoned list. And I can show you, so you can say owner, and you can say self, and you can see all the things that I've abandoned over my time working in Gerrit. So you can go back and see, oh, wow, this is a big change. Had 542 lines, but apparently for some reason or another, I abandoned it. And maybe it was because we ended up rolling it into another change, or I committed the code and before it was merged, we moved on to something else. Like we upgraded the software and now that change is not applicable anymore, or something like that. Sometimes what I will do is, if I'm working on code, I want to get it up to the review. I want to get it up to Gerrit. But since that's not going into the Git repo, I'll just commit it to Gerrit and hold it there and not send any reviewers, and I'll just leave it there. And then as I work, I'll do a commit, amend, commit, amend, commit, amend, commit, amend. And that just gives me a secondary place to store it. But as soon as I'm ready for somebody to review it, let's say I've got it to a point where it's ready to review, then I'll add reviewers and then go through the review process. So sometimes it's like I work on code, but I feel a little bit uncomfortable about having just the only copy on my machine, and I'll commit it to Gerrit just to have a second copy that's up on VLab. And it doesn't do anything. You get a Jenkins job that fires off and you get a new patch set, but it doesn't cause other people to be alerted that you did this. It just becomes kind of like a holding place. And then when you want to add reviewers, you can add reviewers at a later date. So I just did that with a change that I was working on. Sometimes you work on stuff and it's exploratory work. Like you're not sure if this change is going to be the right way to go, but you want to have it stored up on Gerrit so that somebody else can see it or download it and check it out. And they can clone, they can essentially clone and then fetch that change, and they can try it out and work on it. So it's also helpful if you have two people that need to work on code, and it's not necessarily merged into the baseline yet, but you want to have it in this kind of holding area. And then each person can push patch sets if they want to. And then the other person can download the patch sets using that download button. And so it's a way to, it's essentially a gatekeeper between the code repo, the actual code repo, and these changes. So let me see. I think that's about it. So do you guys have any questions? I know that was a lot of information.
That was, Jason, and I really appreciate you going through it. I got some good tips on just good workflow practices. And I'm sure we'll have some questions, and I'm glad this was recorded. I guess the immediate one is, as I said at the onset, we're a pretty small team. For us to be setting up other team members as reviewers and then implementers will be a significant burden on us. And so, I think that some aspects of our project, we really need to establish the discipline of working with that flow. But other aspects are probably best maintained in a, you do something, you go through a review step yourself, and then you implement it yourself. Is that feasible to implement, or do you really have to have somebody else do that for a particular issue?
No, you can do it yourself. So like right now, for instance, the Jenkins job, just verifies that you follow a certain setup, and you could implement like we have this new project or new product called Sonar Cube, which can scan your code for sort of following a convention, and you can write your own rules and things like that to make sure people, like let's say you're writing Python, it can verify that your Python fits within certain conventions that you defined, or it can scan for security issues and things like that. And that can be another reviewer as well as having Jenkins verify your code. But just in general, I think having when you have this kind of gatekeeper between the repo, I find I create less branches. There's less branches that I have to create up on the Git repo, because one way to do the same kind of thing where you have a gatekeeper is to have a feature branch and then work in the feature branch and keep pushing the feature branch to the Git repo, and then at some later date merge them. But this allows you to have one master branch, and then you can commit stuff to this location to Gerrit, and then you can sort of act as an in between while you're working on code. So I think you can use it as a personal place. It also is a great documentation of what has changed and the relationship to those VLab issue numbers. I really like the searching that's available in Gerrit. I've used that so many times. I mean, just so many times there's like, we're moving from, like, for instance, I develop plugins that are built on top of Redmine and or on LifeRay, and I don't I don't remember what the change was and how I connected that into Redmine or into LifeRay, and I can go back and I can search. If I know the issue number, I can go back and search in here and find the exact code that I changed and what was it before and what was it after, and the diff tools are really nice, and it just makes it really easy. One thing to think about in terms of review is it doesn't necessarily, review doesn't have to be, so review can be whatever you want it to be. It can be rigorous, where the person actually checks out the code, the reviewer checks out the code, actually runs it in a test environment, and does all that. Or it can literally be a second set of eyes. Somebody looks through the code and says, oh, you forgot to take out this print statement. Or, hey, I would like you to put more comments in your code. Like your code, or why did you name this variable T? T is not really helpful. It would be better if this variable was named something more, helpful. Like, that's actually temperature rather than T, or something like that. So sometimes just having a second set of eyes on the code is helpful, even if they're not like really intimately involved with the development. The other thing that is important is, like, I don't know on your team if you have a lot of interfaces between your pieces of code. Like if one person writes one part of code, let's say is a back-end web service, and the other person writes the front-end web page, and they have to interface at some point, and that interface is very critical to get right. The person who reviews the code on the front end may just be validating that the interface is using the right method or call or whatever. And so they may be only reviewing a little bit of the total change. Like, right? So they may be any place the two pieces of code touch, they may be reviewing just that little bit.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and I was thinking along exactly those lines because that's essentially how our project works. That once a change gets made to our main code, then changes in the manual are needed, and that's another sub-repository. And there's changes in the graphical interface that may be needed, et cetera. So I think that is a good point.
Did you guys have any other questions?
See, Chantel, Catherine, Kelly, anything from you? Everybody's on mute.
This is Kelly. I don't have any questions, but it was really helpful to hear the explanation of why you would use this versus having multiple branches and then pulling in those branches, which is what I'm more familiar with.
Right, and I think most people perceive, like, I know this from the when you work at VLab, you have to work support shifts where you help people, and you actually people have questions or comments or they want a new repo, and the thing that I hear the most with people when we talk to them about code review is they say, oh, I don't want that extra burden on top of me. It seems like it's like a lot of work to do the code review, and it's something new that I have to learn. And I'm familiar with Git a little bit, but I don't want to have this other stuff. And it's really not that much to learn as far as the Gerrit part. I mean, mostly once you do it like 5 or 6 times, it'll become like a muscle memory. So like, instead of doing the git push like you would normally do, the only thing you're doing is adding this onto the end of it. And for the most part, you're going to be doing the same thing over and over and over again. And then adding the review part, going to the review part, opening the web page and doing that stuff is going to become, you can add that as a little bit. You can start pushing it for review, and then always, like, instead of reviewing it, you could actually just do essentially like a merge, and that kind of just adds a step in. And then when you get more comfortable with it, then you can then start actually doing reviews and and kicking it back, and then doing. I think what you'll find is that the documentation, the benefits of having your code looked at by somebody else other than the developer, there's just a lot of benefits to having that done. You end up producing, at least I can tell you from my standpoint, I end up producing better code because of that. It's not that I'm lazy. It's that when I'm working on something, you may be putting a piece of code in place that's like 100 lines long, and you forget that you did like 10 a day or two ago, you did this one thing. You put a print statement in there, and you just totally forgot about it, and you're working on something else. And then when you push it up for code review, you look at the changes and you're like, oh, I forgot to take that out. And then you go back and you just, take it out, submit for another, another patch set. You don't even have to reject it to submit another patch set. You can submit another patch set as much as you want. But it's really useful to go back up to Gerrit and kind of just do an eye scan over what you submitted. So like,
when you look at the commit, the final commit to master, when it's all done, does it squash all that patch set stuff?
Yep.
So it's cleaner?
So this is all on the same commit. So really all Gerrit does is basically everything that's in this patch set, all these patch sets are, every time you're submitting a patch set, you're adding something or deleting something on top of the original commit. So it's all the same commit message. And then when Gerrit merges that into the main Git repo, essentially it squashes all those patch sets together and then merges it into Git. So yeah, it's a great thing to come in here and look and say, oh, I changed all of this. Okay, that looks right. And then you look at this and you say like, oh, I forgot to take this out or something like that. And then you could just, instead of sending it back to yourself as a review, you could literally just check out this patch set right here, just copy that, come down here, and just do this, and then make your change, and then do a push refs for master, and then it's fixed. So and then it's patch set 3, and then I submit things sometimes and I forget to put the message for Jenkins to verify it, and so I submit it initially, it fails in Jenkins, and then I submit it again 5 minutes later. So you can keep submitting as much as you want. You don't have to do any review in the middle. But then when you're finally done with it, you can approve it and then merge it. And then it goes into the whole Git repo. And then anybody who clones the repo would get that change. When it's in review, the only way to get that review is to do the thing that I was doing with the copying.
Yeah, no, what I was asking was, when someone went in and cloned the repo subsequently, would the history that they get include all this back and forth of the patch sets, or would it just be?
No, the only thing they'll get is whatever this final commit statement is.
Okay.
And then whatever the changes were in the final patch set.
Okay.
So if we're on patch set 16, they would get patch set 16, and they would get whatever's the last thing that's in the commit message.
Okay, that's advantageous.
But if you wanted to, let's say, if somebody wanted to go back and see what all the work was done and see what the documentation of that effort was, they could go to this particular review, and then they could look at the review and see all the changes here. So it's all documented within Gerrit. And who reviewed it, who gave it a +1, who gave it a -1, that sort of thing is all documented within Gerrit. So, and since we're using, since we require that you put the the issue ID up here, you can always go in and search for, you can always say message like this, and then up, and then you can put in 67767. So you can search for this message tag right here in the search, is searching for this phrase anywhere in the commit message. So you could, if you put in your commit message like, hey, I really love work, you could search for it in here just by typing message : and then whatever word you want to look for. And then if we search, you can see you can find that exact issue right here.
Okay. Great. Well, I guess our final thing for cutting over, I guess that's something you need to initiate on your side once we give the go ahead, right?
Yeah, so you have an existing Git repo and you want to add essentially Gerrit to that process, right?
Right, and I guess we've been mulling over whether to take our main repo and the sub repos all in at the same time. I'll convert all of them at the same time, or to commit one, get the feel for it, and then convert the others at a somewhat later time.
Yeah, and that's up to you. We've had people before, groups that we had a group recently that had a whole bunch of repos, and they didn't do them all at once. They did like 2 or 3 a day, and then they waited a week, and then they did a couple more. So it just depends on you guys. Yeah. So basically the way that works is you would contact through our webpage, so through VLab admin.
Yep.
I mean VLab, and then you would come in here and you go into the private side, and in the development services, you can make a request. I mean, you can make a request here, or you could just email VLab admin. You just have to, if you do it through this thing, then you have to just make sure that you indicate in the, kind of the notes what's going on. I would say in that case, you just say email vlabadmin@noaa.gov and just say, I have this repo, or I have these repos, and give the name of the repos, and they're associated with these Redmine projects, and we want to convert number 1 over, and then we're going to convert the other ones at a later date, or something
Okay.
like that.
Sure.
And then whoever's on duty can take care of that for you.
Excellent. Okay. I think that's all the questions I have. Again, I appreciate you recording this for us so that everybody else can take a look later. We can review it ourselves.
Yeah, and if you have any additional questions, if you're looking at the recording and you have additional questions, you can always feel free to email me or email the VLab admin, and that we can answer them.
Okay.
All right, thanks a lot.
Well, thank you, and signing off for today.
All right, have a great day.
Thank you.